Welcome to the Bible Savvy Podcast, a weekly conversation about how to understand, enjoy, and apply God's Word. It's time to jump into a new passage from the Bible Savvy reading plan.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bible Savvy Podcast. I'm here with Pastor Courtney and Pastor David. David, what's our question for today?
Question for today is, if you could instantly master one random skill, what would it be?
So easy. This is like, I would have to be able to instantly master it because I'm too scared to learn how to do this. And I want to be able to do it for the rest of my life. And when I'm 100 years old, I want to be able to do this. Standing backflip.
That is cool because it's a thing you can pull out at any time, and it impresses people all the time.
It would come in so handy.
The condition is you have to be able to do it at 100.
My whole life. If I'm 100 years old, I want to be able to do a standing backflip.
It's in magical Christmas land now. Okay.
It would be awesome. I think that's a good answer.
Here's the thing. I would love to be able to someday run in those masters track meets, where they're running for it's the 50-yard dash and they're going, and then you finish the race and you do a standing backflip.
That would be awesome.
Don't even tell me that would be cool.
I think it would enhance your ministry. People would show up and kids would show up and be like, do you know what Courtney can do?
You're the backflipping kids, Pastor.
I am telling you, this is it is the most useful skill I could think of.
That's good.
But I'm real scared to actually learn how to do one, so.
Okay. Oh, man. No, that'd be awesome. I think, so I can do the basic skill. It's related to roller skating, but I would want to learn how to dance on roller skates. It's so dumb, but I think roller skating is so fun. And if I could just really just have a blast, dancing like crazy, I think that would be
awesome.
Fun.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, those are great answers, guys. Mine is not as fun. Mine is very practical, but fun fact, I can't tread water.
Wait,
I could swim, but I cannot tread water. If you put me in the deep end,
you could go across the
if you said,
pool.
Hey, swim from one side to the other, I can do that. But if you tell me to stop in the middle and just stay up above water, I can't do it. I can't explain why.
Huh.
I can't.
Is it the motion you can't get, or is it
If I knew by this age, I would tell you, but I can't. For some reason, it's just my panic sets in and I start to sink, and I cannot stay above water. I can just go left, right, back, forth. So as long as I'm moving toward a direction, I'm good. But since my childhood, I'm I just don't get it, and I've been trying. Many people have tried to have tried to teach me, but there is a level now. My kids are in swim classes. I'm you learn from the pros because you're not learning from me for some reason.
Wow.
So that's what I would master.
It's sad because it's only really required when you're gonna die.
If you're with your kids in the pool and you're they're jumping off the diving board and you have to be there to get them.
They should not be jumping off the diving board in water that I have to tread in. I just think,
wow. Where?
No, if they can't swim,
okay.
Why would they be jumping off into that deep of water?
Sure.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna be jump off this without me. If you can do it, you're good enough to do it.
That's fair.
So
I suppose I would like to do a standing backflip
into the water.
Into the water, treading.
See, I already can do the standing backflip. I don't need to. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, we are going to get into Numbers chapter 25. Before we do, I do need to give a little bit of a heads up. If you are listening with younger kids, we are going to have some mature themes in here. It's not going to get graphic or anything like that, but there are some things that you might say, little ears, this is not for them. So if you want to do a little quick preview of Numbers chapter 25, you will see immediately what we're talking about, and you can decide if you're cool with that. But let me give you a little context for this passage. So by the way, just a reminder, if you're trying to get context, BibleProject videos, the interview with Dr. Morales. I know we're getting towards the end of Numbers, but sometimes those things are even better after you've read the book. So go check that out. And then always a plug for Dr. Carmen Imes with the interview with her about women in the Pentateuch. Want to push you that way. So Numbers 25 is right after the story that we talked about last week when we talked about Balaam, who was hired by a king named Balak to curse Israel. And so every time Balaam was going to try and curse Israel, he couldn't do it, and he just blessed them. And he blessed them, and he blessed them, and he blessed them. And they realize after a while, this is not going to work. Like, if you're going to stop Israel, it's not because you could curse them. And Balaam comes up with another idea. So at another point in Numbers, it says Balaam's idea was to mislead the people of Israel. And so he says, if you draw them away from their loyalty and worship to God, it might derail them. And so what's going to happen in this story is actually the Midianites and the Moabites, the group of people that were concerned about Israel, trying to put into place this plan to lead Israel away from the one true God. So we're going to read about that. And this really is kind of one of the culminating things in kind of this pattern of Israel being in places where they rebel against God. And it's kind of the high point here of like, oh my goodness, like this is really bad. So we're going to read in Numbers chapter 25, starting in verse 1.
Yes, and I would like to point out that as a children's pastor, right away, there are lots of words that I generally do not use or teach on or anything like that. So they like to give me these passages so that I can read them for all of you. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices to their gods. The people ate the sacrificial meal and bowed down before these gods. So Israel yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them. The Lord said to Moses, "Take all the leaders of these people, kill them and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel." So Moses said to Israel's judges, "Each of you must put to death those of your people who have yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor." Then an Israelite man brought into the camp a Midianite woman right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel while they were weeping at the entrance to the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw this, he left the assembly, took a spear in his hand, and followed the Israelite into the tent. He drove the spear into both of them, right through the Israelite man and into the woman's stomach. Then the plague against the Israelites was stopped. But those who died in the plague numbered 24,000. The Lord said to Moses, "Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, has turned my anger away from the Israelites, since he was as zealous for my honor among them as I am. I did not put an end to them in my zeal. Therefore, tell him I am making my covenant of peace with him. He and his descendants will have a covenant of lasting priesthood, because he was zealous for the honor of his God and made atonement for the Israelites." The name of the Israelite who was killed with the Midianite woman was Zimri, son of Salu, the leader of a Simeonite family. And the name of the Midianite woman who was put to death was Cosbi, son of Zur, a tribal chief of a Midianite family. The Lord said to Moses, "Treat the Midianites as enemies and kill them. They treated you as enemies when they deceived you in the Peor incident involving their sister Cosbi, the daughter of a Midianite leader, the woman who was killed when the plague came as a result of that incident."
All right. I said it wasn't going to get graphic, but it got a little graphic.
It did, yeah.
There's the violence certainly did. So, all right, let's start with observations. What do you guys see in this?
Mm-hmm.
My observation is how much fun it is to hear Courtney say all the words that she tries to avoid.
Which words don't you normally say?
Let's start with the first sentence.
No, so a repeated word was the word yoked, which I thought was distinct. Obviously, we're talking about an agrarian society, that is used to farming, and so reading this, that would feel very normal to them, where I was thinking about 2025 Christians in suburban Chicago. The idea of yoked is a little bit of a foreign idea, but we see it used even later in the New Testament. It reminded me when Paul talks about being unequally yoked with unbelievers and his challenge and warning not to be, that for Christians not to be unequally yoked. And so I thought that was interesting because I hadn't seen that yoked language in the Old Testament before, but the idea of two animals being like two oxen being yoked together with this piece of wood, plowing a field together with one common mission, one common vision of this is what we're doing together and we're going after this thing. And it's not just it feels like when he says yoked, it's elevating this like, hey, this isn't just dabbling in something, or this isn't just sex or romance or whatever. Like there is a uniting of spirit here that is deeper than what you realize. And so the yoked language made it feel much more serious to me when I read it there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that is throughout the Old Testament, throughout the Pentateuch, and this is probably where we start, getting that content warning maybe coming in a little bit. But the marriage covenant idea is so serious. Like they are married. Like this is a covenant. Like they've entered into this as a marriage. And when they yoke themselves to the Baal of Peor, like that is like, yeah, the Lord's anger should burn against them. That's an affair. Like that's we are tearing that apart, and it is a break of the marriage covenant. Like that to me, I mean, I read that first line and went, "Oh, things are getting deep." Like
and you're talking about the covenant between God and Israel.
Yeah.
Even aside from the individual people here, you're talking about.
I'm talking about that is like that. I think sometimes, even with my daughter who's in high school, we were talking about that one day because we were talking about how Israel had rebelled. And I said, this is a marriage. Like they are ripping apart. They've made a marriage covenant. Like this happened. There was sacrifice. There was walking between the sacrifice and all the things that meant. And now they're saying, well, throw that away. Like not just throw it away. Like let's rip it away. Let's be yoked to like completely like what we should not be involved with. And then later it gets even worse because these things happen in the tent of meeting in very physical ways. So
I was going to make the observation of the fact that there are two sins here, and they're not sins that I think we normally sort of like immediately associate, like modern people don't normally immediately associate together. There's a sin of sexual immorality and there's a sin of idolatry. So they're like, sleeping with people, and we say, oh, well, that might be like kind of a personal thing you're not supposed to do. And then we think of like, well, they're worshiping other gods. It's like, well, that's like a religious thing that you're not supposed. And then we kind of keep them separate. But for several reasons. One, the reason you mentioned, like, no, the worship of God was related to the metaphor, and more than a metaphor, was being married, right? And so there was that imagery already there. But even, and I don't know if this is in the footnote of a study Bible or not, but many pagan worship practices involve sexual immorality. And so the idea that, Baal is a god that's going to come up a lot in the Bible. He's a storm and fertility god. So if you want your crops to grow, if you want your your families to have babies, like you go to Baal because that's what he does. And so what do you do to worship Baal, who's a fertility god? Well, you have the act of fertility, and in some ways that's meant to kind of draw his attention or honor him in some way. And so he sees that he makes you more fertile. So there's more going on here than just, man, they're really into these women, right? Oh, wow, that's great. And they are really into their gods. Like those two things are linked very closely together.
Yeah, which explains then in verse 4, when the Lord says to Moses, take all the leaders of these people, kill them and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel. Like this is serious stuff. And, you might read that. And again, if your kids are reading it, they're like, well, God is mean. Like, why did he tell them to kill these people?
Yeah.
This is serious business. Like that's not, God values life. This is serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, verse 6, when it says, the Israelite man brought into the camp a Midianite woman right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel while they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting, is such a brazen, audacious action that to me shows that this kind of behavior was so pervasive that they weren't even sneaking it. It wasn't even like at night, they're sneaking them in or whatever. It was, there's Moses, leader of our nation. Who cares? This is what we do, and big deal. I don't care about this mourning that they're doing.
Well, and they're weeping over that in particular.
Yeah.
Like, it's like okay, they're upset about this. Let's show you what we're up to. This is okay. There is something ambiguous in here that I think makes it even more like high-handed there. it is not clear what tent they're in, right?
That's what I was going to ask about.
The tent that's talking about right before that is the tent of meeting. And it says, so they're in front of the tent of meeting, and Phinehas follows them and followed the Israelite into the tent. So the tent immediate before that is the tent where Moses would go meet with God, the tabernacle. Like, this is what we're talking about, right? And so, unless, I mean, there's some ambiguity. It could be another nearby tent. But either way, this guy has traveled to exactly where God meets with his people and is doing this. And if this is connected to pagan worship, right? Like, this is not just like, well, we want to be together and where are we going to do it? No, this is a deliberate act of worship.
Yeah.
So that changes the tenor of things. Yeah. This is not the Levites hunting down people who are sleeping with people they shouldn't. Like, we go into our minds and say, well, that just seems awful. Like, is that what we're supposed to do? Like, go find everybody who's, sleeping with someone they shouldn't and kill them? Well, this is a step beyond that in terms of the kind of thing that they're enforcing here,
Yeah. Yep. Now, the turn there, though, is verse 7.
Yes.
When the grandson, the next generation.
Yes.
I was loving that moment, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, obviously it's a weird moment to love in
Do
Scripture.
you want to show the grandson of who? Like, you want to explain that part?
Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron. So he's Aaron's grandson.
Yeah.
He's a Levite. He's a priest. Leaves the assembly. Like, I love this visual. I don't know how old this grandson would be, but I love the idea that a young person, this generation that is actually going to inherit the land.
Yes.
He goes and he's like, not in my house.
Yes. Yeah.
He's like, like, not today. He's like, it's going down. He has so much zeal that he grabs the spear.
You're really relishing this violence here.
Like, it's such a moment. It is such.
No, he's bold.
Such a moment. Like, he's like, I just love. Again, I'm always going to be a fan of the next generation, right? Like, so you tell me that some young person is so zealous for God that he says it's not right.
Yeah.
And he's so zealous that he would do something about it. This, I mean, to me,
and that was
moment
passed from generation to generation.
Yes,
there was an intentional handoff.
Or was it like, or is he like, man, I know that the generation before me has screwed this up. It's not happening. Not today. Not for my generation.
Yeah.
We're going in.
Yeah.
And he grabs the spear. I mean, I'm like, man, yeah.
Yeah. Eleazar and Aaron basically did the right things. Although Aaron, when he was in the equivalent situation, right? So at Mount Sinai, golden calf. Aaron did not do this, right?
No.
Like, by grace, he was allowed to keep going. But like, when they were all like, let's worship a different God, Aaron was like, okay, here we go. Aaron's grandson, who has seen them wander because of their rebellion, is doing this. Yeah.
Like, he's mad.
And if you're the grandson of the high priest, guess what? You're the next high priest. So like, he's going to be leading them as a people here.
Yep. And then, of course, the Lord's response in that is so interesting, because Lord specifically names, like, Phinehas has turned my anger away from the Israelites since he was as zealous, and that the zealous is repeated here, as zealous for my honor among them as I am. I did not put an end to them in my zeal. Therefore, tell them I'm making my covenant of peace. And so there was this, like, the Lord naming an individual of, like, I'm pointing this out. I'm emphasizing this quality that his zeal for my honor is what delivered the Israelites.
Yeah. And he calls that atonement. He says it's atonement for the Israelites.
Yes.
Like, I wrote sacrifice 13, next to that. Like, that's...
Well, that's the really uncomfortable part about this, but it kind of exposes what we don't think too much about all of the other sacrifices. So the sinners have died for their sin. The difference between that and a sacrifice that makes atonement is that someone died in your place. But we often just think, okay, well, we say that, but we don't think, no, this is what ought to have happened. There should have been an execution, right? And there wasn't. So there is like something here, like making atonement, because the sinners were eliminated, not because the sacrifice was. Yeah. I think for those who are troubled by the violent part about this, there's a few different things to think about this. One thing to note is we've already talked about it, like how brazen this is, right? And how it's not even just a private offense. Okay, there was capital punishment for adultery and whatever, but this is them doing something to defile the holy place. But then it's also the job of the priest to do that. We think of priests we probably layer a little of like the modern idea of a priest, like a Catholic priest or an Anglican priest or whatever. It's like, oh, it's a wise, thoughtful, spiritual person or whatever. Well, part of what the priest's job was to be the guards of the palace of God, right? Like that's what the tabernacle is. It's the place where God's throne room is. It's where he meets and holds court. And so what do you have there? You have a guard that says no one gets in here who doesn't belong here. And so if someone comes in to say, I'm going into the court of the king and do this thing to offend the king, it's the guard's job to say, no, not here. We're going to go do it. And so he's actually doing his job. I heard one commentator talk about this, like this was what Adam and Eve were supposed to do when the snake showed up, right? Like this was the holy place where God was dwelled with his people. And their job was to crush the serpent. And so this is someone who's saying, I'm going to come in here and do what I think is best. And the priest said, no, not like you said, not in my house.
Not today, not in my house.
Sorry, this is all I can think of is
not in my house.
Dikembe Mutombo.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, that's a sports reference, guys. I'm just going to say I generated a sports reference. I realize it's from the 90s.
Come on. Okay, I do have a question. There was one confusing part about this that I don't know if I'm just not reading it correctly, but it references the plague very quickly. Like when the plague against the Israelites was stopped, and I went, wait, what plague? What did I miss? And those who died in the plague numbered 24,000. Then the plague is mentioned at the end that the plague came as a result of that incident. Can you explain this to me? What am I missing?
It's not mentioned overtly. It is implied by verse 3 when the Lord's anger burned against them. And so it's a confusing part. It's like all these other incidents where they rebel against God, and it'll say in most of those more explicitly, like he caused the plague or he sent snakes or whatever the things were that were kind of like the consequences.
Yes,
I think it's supposed to just be like,
got it.
That he did it.
Reference
He's doing that. Yep. All right, let's go to one of the M's in comma. Let's talk about message here. How would you sum this up? Grab a principle from it.
My message was 2 words: holiness matters.
Yeah.
Holiness matters. It matters to be set apart. It matters to pursue holiness and to make that your aim. And so, holiness matters.
Wow.
Yeah, so obviously I think you mentioned it's not just sexual sin, it is idolatry, but I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge the sexual sin element of this. So my message said that sexual sin is a rejection of the will and honor of God, and by default, a rejection of God himself. It sort of reminded me of later on when Jesus talks in the Sermon on the Mount, like, hey, if your right eye causes you to stumble, you gouge it out. Your right hand causes you to stumble, you cut it off. It's this kind of rejection of God's honor, and so we have to deal with it seriously.
Yeah. My message is God judges high-handed sin severely. And so I'm highlighting the high-handed part because he judges all sin, but when someone does it knowingly and deliberately, and we don't like to think of that being something we do, and I certainly hope that people who are walking with Jesus are maybe they fall into temptation, but there's a quick remorse and that sort of thing. But there are times when people get to a place where we say, I know it's wrong, but I don't care. Mm-hmm. I know it's wrong, but I'm going to do it anyway. Or, well, whatever. God's just going to have to deal with that. Those kinds of attitudes, and there is a difference there. There is a difference. I think there are a lot of people who worry about the things where they say, I've been fighting against this sin, and from time to time, it continues to plague me, or I keep fighting, but I keep falling, but I keep fighting. There's a difference between that when you get to the place where your heart is calloused, when your attitude is brazen, when you are saying, whatever, I'm just going to keep doing this. And what I find is hard, or sad, I should say, is I like to think that most people don't get there, but I've talked to enough people where I realize underneath there was a part of them that just said, whatever, I gave up and I'm going with this. And the message I think here is God judges high-handed sin severely. He takes that really seriously.
Yeah.
All right, for meditation, here's what I want to do. There's not like a great verse. It's like, why don't you just ponder this for a while? So I think the appropriate thing to do is confession. Sometimes the way we process a hard-hitting passage like this is to be reflective on our life and to say, are there things that I need to come clean with, that I need to submit to God about? So take 45 seconds or as long as you need to go ahead and spend some time in confession. All right, let's turn to the A and comma application. What do you do in light of all this?
Yeah, well, my message was holiness matters. And if you couldn't tell when we were talking about this, got a little fired up, right? Like Phineas and the way he protects his people. It just impacted me in a huge way. Again, it's a next generation thing. But also the question I wrote is, how am I leading with zeal? And I was struck with kind of the corporate nature of this, right? It's the whole country that's being led in this way. We're seeing it go down this way. The Lord's fierce anger is burning against Israel, against the whole nation. And for me, that was like a thought of, you know what? I'm a leader in a church. Like I pastor and shepherd people. And I hope that if someone were blatantly and flagrantly out there, like sinning in such a way that it was like, this is intentional, I've given up on this. I'm not talking about, like people who are sincerely working on something. That's different, that's a different category really. But people who are like, yeah, this is just what it is. I hope I'd go after it like that. I hope I'd pick up my spear.
Yeah, keep the spears away from Courtney.
I'd be like, let's hunt this out because it matters too much. Like it matters too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
It matters too much.
And for clarity, in the New Testament, we do take sin justice seriously.
Yes.
But with less blades, right?
Yeah.
So, but this is, this is worth clarifying. All of the places in the Old Testament where it talks about capital punishment, where people are killed, that's where the New Testament talks about excommunication. It doesn't. That's a word that's not actually in the Bible. But when it talks about kicking someone out, so when we talk about church discipline at our church, this is what we're talking about. High-handed sins, flagrant sins, where people say, I'm not willing to be repentant. We're incredibly gracious for people who say, man, I just keep messing up. I need help.
Yes.
But when someone says, this is the way I'm going, we say, we're going to have to put you on the outside here because we got to be zealous for what this is.
Are you zealous he was zealous for the honor of his God.
Yeah.
And are there times, and I admit this is kind of part of my personality type. Like I'm an advocate. I'm a Enneagram 8-ish. I'm like a 7-8. And so like these kinds of things fire me up. Like I'm gonna go. I'm not afraid of conflict. Things like that. But it really made me think. Like, are there times when I'm like, you are defacing that which is precious and holy to me. Like his bride is beautiful.
Yeah.
And if you are defacing it, that should make me mad.
That's right.
That should make me flat out angry and zealous for his church. And
Yeah. So so my message was a little bit more in the vein of just like specifically the sexual sin in the camp. So my message was sexual sin is a rejection of the will and honor of God, and by default a rejection of God himself. And so my application, and then I want to tease it out a little bit, is to honor God by ruthlessly eliminating lust and confessing to my accountability partner if and when it happens. So right to the confession piece, right? So Bible savvy, we're focusing on one passage, but I can't read this and not think about so many things that Paul said in the New Testament that connect to this. I mentioned the yoke language already. But there was another one that kept coming up as I was reading this, and that's 1 Corinthians 6:18-20, where he says, flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price, the blood of Jesus. And then he says, therefore, honor God with your bodies. So there's that price of the blood of Christ, and there's that honor piece again. And so I'm just connecting these two. I'm like, Paul obviously knew these passages, and there's a separation. You're bought at a price, the atoning blood of Jesus. And what did Phineas do? He was as zealous for the Lord's honor as God is. And so he's like, if there's sexual sin in the camp and idolatrous sin in addition to that, I'm going to remove it. I honestly wish that the conversation around the sexualization of our culture and confessing of sexual sin and lust and pornography was not weird for us to talk about. Like I spend a lot of time with our men's ministry, young adults. These are conversations that I'm bringing up a lot because I feel like a lot of people live in this kind of secret isolation and struggle. And I look at what Jesus did on the cross and said, listen, you don't have to walk in shame, but we do have to bring it into the light. We have to expose it, even as God said in this, like we have to expose the sin that's happening in the camp here, so that we can reject it, we can remove it, we can be zealous about the removal to honor God, and then that's where we find the atoning blood of Jesus to cover all sin and be ruthless about it. So there, I do think there's an invitation for confession, for accountability, for walking into freedom.
Yeah. My application was going to be similar along your lines, to do what it takes to eliminate that high-handed sin. Because my message was God judges high-handed sin severely. But even before it gets to that point, doing what it takes to say, I'm never going to let it get to that place where it's hurting my heart. But even as I listen to you guys, I think of another application. It's the kind of the combo of you saying, this is the next generation saying we're going to be zealous. And you saying, no, like get it out there and get it into the light. As much as I want to do this in my own life, I want to pray for this for the next generation of our church. Like that to me feels like a worthy thing to say. If there was one thing that the young adults and the students and young people of our church were known for, I would love for it to be that they were zealous for God. Yep. And they were ruthless in making sure they eliminated sin from their lives. Like that changes things. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So my application is to pray for the next generation to care that much. Yep.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Join us again next Monday for a new episode where we'll be looking at another passage from the Bible Savvy reading schedule. And in the meantime, if you're not following along with the reading plan, check out BibleSavvy.com. Also, you can subscribe and leave a review on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Email us your questions or suggestions at podcast@BibleSavvy.com. Lastly, tell your friends, and we'll talk to you next week.